3 a.m. basement corridor. Memorial Regional. My mop hit the same linoleum it hits every night when I heard the shuffle. Then the fall. I caught him before his skull hit the floor. 80-something, hospital gown, skin like wet paper over bone. A leather folder slipped from his grip and hit the tile. His hand locked around my wrist. Your mother, the folder lay open to a will. The name across the top, Ashworth. My mother's maiden name. If this story hooks you, hit subscribe and tell me your country in the comments. It means the world to me. My name is Gavin Trask. I'm 36 years old, and I mop hospital floors on the graveyard shift for $14.50 an hour. That's who I am now. But it's not who I was. My father, Ned Trask, was an auto mechanic in Pasadena, Texas. Same shop for 31 years. Same bay, same lift, same set of Craftsman wrenches he'd bought at 19 and never replaced because they never broke. He could diagnose a transmission by sound alone, close his eyes, listen to the engine, name the failing component before the hood came up. He raised me alone after my mother died. Ellen Trask. Cancer took her when I was 12. A Tuesday in November. Rain on the hospital windows, the heart monitor flattening into a tone I can still hear if a room gets quiet enough. She was 34. I remember her hands against my face, always warm, and the way she'd hum while she cooked. Ooh. She never talked about where she came from, never mentioned her maiden name or any family she'd left behind. What she'd been before Pasadena, before Ned, before me, I never thought to ask. She was just Mom, and then she wasn't. My dad didn't fall apart after the funeral. That wasn't his way. Next morning, he put on his coveralls, drove to the shop, and started on a 5150 with a blown clutch. I watched him from the bay door that afternoon, standing in my school clothes because the bus dropped me off there like it always did. "Dad," I said, "are you okay?" He didn't look up from the engine block. Hands busy, head quiet. "That's the only way through, son." He taught me that a man's dignity lives in his hands. Not in his title, not in his paycheck, not in what other people call him. In what he can do, what he builds, what he fixes. Pasadena wasn't much. Refineries on the horizon, tract houses with chain-link fences, trucks in every driveway. My dad came home at 6:15, washed the grease off his hands at the kitchen sink, and we ate together. Every night. No TV, just the two of us. One evening when I was 15, I asked him if he ever wanted something bigger. Own his own shop. Start a business. He set his fork down. Bigger than what? I don't know. More than this. He picked the fork back up. Every car I touch leaves here running better than it came in. You find me something bigger than that. 6 years later, I left Pasadena. I went to the University of Houston on Pell Grants and a night job stocking shelves at Heb. Graduated in 4 years, 3 GPA, with a job offer from Meridian Logistics Group, a mid-sized shipping firm on the north side of the Houston Ship Channel. 8 years I spent there. Senior Supply Chain Analyst. The title sounds like paperwork, and it is. But the kind that tells you everything if you know how to read it. A bill of lading is the birth certificate of every shipment, origin port, destination port, routing codes, tariff classifications, cargo weight, carrier allocation. Every container crossing an ocean generates a stack of documents. I read them the way my father listened to engines. Most people see columns of numbers. I saw patterns. Port differentials between Galveston and Long Beach. Tariff misclassifications that cost clients 6 figures per quarter. Routing errors that added a week to delivery when a single code change could cut it to 2 days. My first year, I caught a tariff misclassification on a bulk chemical shipment that had been running 14 months, every container coded as Class 3 flammable liquid when half the cargo qualified for Class 8 corrosive, a lower rate. The correction saved the client $340,000 in a single quarter. My supervisor, Linda Chen, 25 years in the business, looked at the spreadsheet and shook her head. "How did you see that?" she asked. "The numbers were wrong," I said. They bothered me. That was the year I made senior analyst. People depended on my work. Linda started routing the hard accounts to my desk without asking. At 28, I met Vanessa Wainwright at a charity gala for the Houston Children's Fund. Black tie event at the Petroleum Club, the kind of room where men in tailored suits write 5-figure checks between courses. I was there because Meridian had bought a table. She was there because her father, Roland Wainwright, real estate developer, board member, the kind of man whose name shows up on hospital wings, sat 3 tables over with a bourbon and half the room's attention. She wore a green dress and held a champagne flute she never drank from. I was near the bar, pulling at a rented tuxedo that didn't fit across the shoulders. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," she said. "I'd rather be reading freight manifests," I told her. "But the shrimp is good." She laughed. Not the polished sound I'd hear later at River Oaks dinner parties. A real laugh, head tipped back, eyes closed for half a second. We talked for an hour. She asked what I did, and when I explained, the routing codes, the tariff structures, how you could trace a container from Shanghai to Houston through 12 ports just by reading the numbers. She asked questions no one at a cocktail party had ever asked. "So you look at a page of codes and know if something's wrong," she said. "Wrong, inefficient, fraudulent. The numbers show all of it. Must be nice. Working with something that can't lie to you." We were married within a year. I entered the Wainwright world one step at a time, not noticing how fast the current ran until I was already downstream. The house came first. A Georgian colonial on Inwood Drive in River Oaks, 9,000 square feet, 6 bedrooms, pool, circular driveway. Vanessa picked it. Roland made 1 phone call and the mortgage closed in 9 days. Then came the rest: club memberships, foundation dinners, weekends at Galveston beach houses owned by families whose names appeared on street signs. Vanessa moved through that world without translation. She'd been born into it. River Oaks from the cradle. Private schools, cotillion, sorority president at SMU. She knew which fork matched which course and whose name you never mentioned at the country club. I learned, wore the suits, shook the hands, hosted parties where I didn't know half the guests, wrote checks to charities because Vanessa said it was expected. Once, at a Wainwright Foundation benefit, she introduced me to a table of donors as my husband and moved on before giving my name. I stood there with my hand half extended toward a man already looking past me for someone worth knowing. I was always translating, converting one language to another, the way I converted port codes into cost analyses at work. Roland Wainwright was the first person who made me understand the translation would never be good enough. I met him the week after the engagement, at his offices on Post Oak Boulevard. Big man, 6'2", broad shoulders gone thick from expensive lunches, silver hair swept back, a golfer's permanent squint. His handshake gripped too long and squeezed too hard, the grip of a man measuring what he'd just acquired. His corner office looked over the Houston skyline from 28 floors, and the walls were lined with framed Texas history. Republic of Texas currency. A signed Sam Houston letter under museum glass. Original spindle-top oil certificates. The room smelled like old leather and bourbon before he ever opened the bottle. He poured 2 bourbons without asking if I wanted one. "So you're the logistics fellow," he said. "Supply chain analyst," I said. "Senior." "Right." He handed me the glass. "What's your father do, Gavin?" "He's a mechanic, Pasadena." Roland gave a slow nod, the kind that means the verdict's already in. "Nothing wrong with that. Honest work." He said it the way Texans say, "Bless his heart." Not a compliment. A classification. He raised his glass. "Welcome to the family, son." Son? Not his son. A word that sounded like an invitation, but worked like a fence. I should have heard it. I didn't. Caleb, my first boy, was born 2 years after the wedding. Liam, my second, followed 2 years after that. They became the center of everything. I'd come home from Meridian and find Caleb, age 4, sitting on the kitchen floor with my old briefcase open, pretending to read Invoices. Liam would crawl into my lap at bedtime and fall asleep with his fist around my index finger, holding on like I might disappear. Saturday mornings were ours. I'd take them to Herman Park, let them chase ducks around the pond. Caleb would narrate everything. "That duck has a green head, Dad." "That means it's a boy duck." Liam just ran. Ran until he fell, got up, ran again. Those mornings were the only hours in my week that felt completely mine. I worked hard the rest of the time. 12-hour days during peak shipping season. Port inspections in Galveston and Corpus Christi. Home late with routing schedules in my head while I built Lego towers on the living room floor. I got promoted twice. My salary hit 6 figures in my 6th year. Not Wainwright money, not within sight of it, but earned money. Money from reading documents and solving problems, not from knowing which judge owed you a favor. I thought I'd built something that would hold. A family, a career, a life my father would have recognized. Vanessa hosted her book clubs, ran the boys' school calendars, kissed me each morning at the door. The boys were growing. The house ran without friction. I didn't see what Roland saw. At dinner parties, he introduced me to his associates with one hand on my shoulder, a grip that looked friendly and felt like ownership. "This is Gavin, Vanessa's husband. Works in shipping logistics. Supply chain analysis." I stopped correcting him after the 3rd time. At family dinners, he'd talk over me. Ask Vanessa about the boys' schools as if I weren't 3 feet away. Once, when I offered an opinion on a property deal he was describing, he paused and looked at me like I'd spoken out of turn. "Appreciate the input, Gavin, but this one's a little above your pay grade," he said. The table laughed. Vanessa studied her plate. I heard years later, after everything fell apart from Vanessa's cousin at a family Christmas I'd been cut from, what Roland told people when I wasn't in the room. That Vanessa had married beneath her. That it was a phase. That the boys carried Wainwright blood, and blood outlasts bad decisions. He kept me around the way a man keeps a stray. His daughter dragged home. Feed it. Give it a corner. Wait for it to leave. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that Roland's patience had nothing to do with kindness. I understood that years later. What those 8 years of smiles and bourbon really meant. He wasn't measuring my worth. He was measuring a risk. The risk that his daughter's husband, a man who read shipping documents for a living, who caught patterns no one else could see, might one day open the wrong file, scan the wrong invoice, and recognize something he was never supposed to find. He didn't hate me because I was beneath his daughter. He feared me because I was the one person who could read what he'd buried. And I didn't even know it. It didn't start with a fight. It started with what I let pass. Vanessa and I had been married 4 years when she had my home office converted into a reading nook. I was in Corpus Christi for a 3-day port inspection. Came back to find cream walls, a velvet chaise, and a stack of coffee table books where my desk used to be. "Where's my desk?" I asked. "In the garage," she said. I needed the space. "You could have asked." She looked at me the way you look at someone who's complained about a parking spot. "It's a desk, Gavin. I'll get you a new one." She didn't. My files sat in a cardboard box by the water heater. 2 years of work documents. My father's death certificate. He'd died of a heart attack in the shop 2 years into the marriage, alone, on a Tuesday afternoon. Caleb's first drawing of me. A stick figure with oversized hands he'd labeled Dad in red crayon. The death certificate, the drawing, 2 years of files, stacked next to a bag of rock salt. I moved the box to a closet. Said nothing. The scheduling came next. Caleb had started T-ball, and Liam was in a toddler swim class. Vanessa enrolled them both in Saturday morning programs. The one morning, I didn't work. "These were the only spots," she said. "Both programs? Same Saturday morning?" "The Kellerman Academy doesn't rearrange for you, Gavin." I changed my hours to free up Wednesday evenings. Within a month, Vanessa filled Wednesdays with piano lessons and a French tutor. When I suggested we coordinate, she said she'd handle it. She always handled it. The boys were disappearing from my week one evening at a time, and every conversation about it ended the same way. Vanessa's chin lifting half an inch, her voice dropping into the register she used with the housekeeper. Then the corrections. At a dinner party hosted by one of Roland's associates, I used the word irregardless, talking to a real estate attorney. Vanessa touched my arm, a grip that looked affectionate from across the table. "He means regardless," she said. "Gavin's from Pasadena." The attorney laughed. I took a drink of water and let the moment pass. It wasn't the word that cut. It was the geography. She'd turned where I came from into an apology. At another event, I mentioned my father's work, 31 years in the same shop, and Vanessa changed the subject before I finished the sentence. I asked about it in the car. "No one at that table wants to hear about auto repair," she said. "He fixed engines for 3 decades. That's great. But read the room, Gavin. Read the room." Her father's phrase. She'd started speaking his language without noticing, or maybe she noticed and didn't care. The woman who'd asked me to explain routing codes at a cocktail party, who laughed with her head back and her eyes closed. In her place stood a Wainwright daughter, who looked at her husband and saw what Roland had always seen. A man from the wrong zip code, Craig Devereaux Jr., arrived that spring. junior partner at Devereaux and Associates, the firm that handled Roland's legal work. His father had founded the practice, and Roland had been their biggest client for 20 years. 31. Yale Law, a jaw that belonged in a catalog and the easy confidence of a man who'd never had to justify his seat at any table. He appeared at family dinners, the way furniture appeared in a room Vanessa redecorated. One day he was just there. She introduced him as Craig, one of Daddy's attorneys. He shook my hand without pressure. The handshake of a man who'd been told he didn't need to try. I noticed things. The angle of Vanessa's body when she talked to him. The real laugh, head back, eyes shut, that she hadn't aimed at me in 2 years. Credit card charges I hadn't seen before, a restaurant in Montrose I'd never heard of, a boutique in the Heights, a spa appointment that showed up 3 times in 1 month. I said nothing, not from fear, because I wanted to be wrong. I was looking for Liam's inhaler when I found the receipts. Zippered pocket of Vanessa's travel bag. 2 nights at the Hotel Grand Duca. $487 a night. The dates matched a weekend she'd told me she was at a wellness retreat in Fredericksburg. I laid them on the bed and waited. She came in at 9:30. Saw the papers on the bedspread. Her face went still. "I can explain," she said. 2 nights at the Grand Duca. You told me Fredericksburg. The retreat fell through. It was last minute. $487 a night. Who were you with? Her jaw tightened. I don't owe you an interrogation. You just answered the question. 5 seconds of nothing. My hands on my knees. The air conditioner clicked on above the bed. Then she picked up her phone and dialed. I watched her press it to her ear, turn toward the window. 3 rings. "Daddy," she said. "We have a problem. Not Craig, not a friend, not a counselor. Caught in a lie." And her first call went to the man who bankrolled the firm where her lover worked. I sat on the bed and listened to her murmur for 4 minutes. She hung up without turning around. "My father's attorney will be in touch," she said. "Find somewhere else to sleep tonight." I checked into a Motel 6 off the Southwest Freeway. $62 a night. I lay on the bedspread in my clothes and watched the light change on the ceiling. Didn't sleep. Got up at 6, drove to Meridian, clocked in. 72 hours later, a junior associate from Devereaux and Associates walked onto the floor at Meridian Logistics with an envelope and a voice that carried. Roland could have used a process server. He sent a firm associate instead. "Gavin Trask, you've been served." My supervisor, Linda Chen, looked up from her desk. Everyone on the floor looked up. The associate was already walking away. I opened the filing in the parking lot. Vanessa sought full custody of both children, the house, both vehicles, spousal support. Grounds, irreconcilable differences. The man she'd been sleeping with worked at the firm representing her in the divorce. Nobody on her side saw a problem with that. What Roland did next was quiet and precise and total. The phone calls started that week. He sat on 3 industry boards where logistics hiring decisions came up over lunch. He didn't need formal channels. A word here, a comment there, over bourbon with men who owed him favors. I learned what he'd done months later from a hiring manager named Peters at a Galveston freight company, a man I'd worked with on a joint tariff audit years back. He was the only one who agreed to meet me. We sat in a diner on Harborside Drive, and he told me what everyone else wouldn't. "Someone's making calls about you," he said. "I don't know who, but your name comes up and people go quiet." Words like unstable. Words like liability. How bad? Bad enough that 3 companies I know pulled your application after a single phone call. One of them had already drafted an offer letter. I thanked him for saying it out loud, drove home, sat in the apartment parking lot for 20 minutes with the engine off. 47 applications of 8 months. 3 interviews, 0 offers. Companies that had recruited me 2 years earlier now returned form rejections. The supply chain industry in Houston ran through a handful of boardrooms, and Roland occupied a chair in every one. The custody case landed in Courtroom 4C, 3rd floor, Harris County Family Courthouse. Every hearing, same room. Judge Harmon Kessler, 61, wire-rimmed glasses, silver hair parted with the precision of a man who believed order was the same thing as justice. I learned the rest later. Public records, courthouse gossip, the kind of digging a desperate man does at 3 in the morning. Kessler and Roland played golf at River Oaks Country Club every other Saturday. Roland had sponsored Kessler's club membership 9 years earlier. Kessler's wife chaired a charity that collected 5-figure annual donations from the Wainwright Foundation. None of this appeared in any filing. None of it needed to. My attorney was a court-appointed pro bono lawyer named Davis, who carried 40 cases at once. He met me in the hallway before the final hearing, manila folder under his arm, tie pulled loose. "I filed the motion on judicial bias," he said, "but I need you to understand it's a long shot." How long? The kind where the judge decides if the judge is biased. He'd also filed a conflict of interest complaint with the state bar. It was still under review when the final hearing came and went. He did his best. His best wasn't enough against a firm that billed $800 an hour and a judge who'd decided the outcome before calling the court to order. Kessler awarded Vanessa full custody. The ruling cited my declining professional stability and my inability to maintain a home environment appropriate for minor children. The stability Roland had destroyed. The home I couldn't afford because no one would hire me. A closed loop sealed by a man in a black robe who'd drained Roland's bourbon the Saturday before he signed the order. Vanessa sat across the aisle, legs crossed, hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at me. Not once. 18 months. That's all it took. Career gone. House gone. Sons gone. The suits went to a consignment shop in Montrose. The anniversary watch went next. Then the car, which covered 3 months of rent and a retainer. I couldn't keep paying. I applied to everything outside logistics. Restaurants, warehouses, retail stock rooms. Roland's reach didn't extend that far, but a 2-year employment gap and a custody loss made every hiring manager hesitate. Jorge Medina didn't hesitate. Night maintenance supervisor at Memorial Regional Hospital. Stocky, 52, gray at his temples, 17 years running the graveyard crew. He read my application in the hospital cafeteria, set it down, and looked at my face. "You show up on time?" he asked. "Every shift. Start Monday. 11 to 7. $14.50 an hour." I mopped corridors, emptied biohazard bins, scrubbed operating room floors with disinfectant that cracked my knuckles raw. The basement was mine. A 1/4 mile of linoleum connecting the service elevator to the loading dock. Fluorescent lights overhead at 3 a.m., no windows. No visitors. 7 miles away, my boys slept in a mansion on Inwood Drive. Designer bedrooms I'd never seen. Clothes I didn't buy. A life assembled around the space where a father used to stand. The way Vanessa filled a room after she'd emptied it of everything that was mine. 7 miles. In Houston traffic, 20 minutes. In a courtroom owned by Roland Wainwright, it was the distance between a father and his sons. The Murphy bed squeaked when I lowered it. Every night, same sound metal brackets grinding against the wall mount in the 420-square-foot studio on Dowling Street. 3rd Ward. $685 a month cash to a landlord named Delroy who didn't run background checks. That mattered when your ex-father-in-law had poisoned every reference you'd ever had. The apartment held what it needed to hold. A 2-burner hot plate on a plywood counter. A window air conditioner that rattled loud enough to cover the street noise. One shelf above the bathroom door. On it, a single-framed photograph, Caleb and Liam from last Christmas wearing matching reindeer sweaters Vanessa had picked out. Caleb's smile was real. Liam was looking off camera, distracted by something I couldn't see. I kept the place clean, hospital-grade clean. Bleach on the bathroom tile, Windex on the one window, floors mopped with the same solution I used on the linoleum at Memorial Regional. Habits carry over. You scrub enough surfaces at 3 a.m., you stop tolerating dirt anywhere. The court order specified supervised visitation every other Saturday, 10 a.m. to noon, at Breckenridge Park in the Heights. 2 hours. Monitored. Kessler's ruling treated me like a hazard that required containment. I arrived 30 minutes early. Always did. Parked my truck, an '09 Tacoma with 180,000 miles I'd bought off a nurse's aide at the hospital for $3,200, and sat on the concrete picnic table closest to the swing set. The concrete was cold through my jeans. The park wasn't much. Rusted chains on the swings, a sandbox with a faded turtle sculpture half buried in wet sand, 2 picnic tables with initials carved into the wood. No shade in summer, no shelter in winter. A neutral location, the court called it. Dale Pressler, the court-appointed visitation supervisor, set up his folding chair at 9,040s. Mid-40s, buzz cut, clipboard in one hand, travel mug in the other. He logged everything in 15-minute increments. Duration of physical contact. Emotional state of the children. My behavior cataloged and filed. "Morning, Mr. Trask," he said. "Dale." He clicked his pen. "Ready." At 10,032, a silver Lexus SUV pulled into the lot. Not Vanessa. Her nanny, Isabella, a quiet Guatemalan woman in her 50s who never made eye contact with me. She opened the rear door, and Caleb climbed out first. His hair was different, combed to one side now, the way Roland wore his. He spotted me and walked over. Not running. He used to run. Liam followed, in new sneakers that looked like they'd never touched dirt. He hung back by the car, one hand on Isabella's wrist. "Come on, buddy," I said. He let go of her hand and walked to the picnic table. Sat down across from me. Looked at his shoes. "Hey, Gavin," he said. The air conditioner in the Lexus hummed. Dale's pen scratched on the clipboard. Somewhere behind me, a dog barked twice and stopped. Gavin. Not Dad, not Daddy. My first name, delivered in the flat tone of a word he'd been practicing. I looked at Caleb. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Liam," I said. "What did you call me?" "That's your name," he said. the voice of a child, repeating what he'd been told. I let it go, not because it didn't cut, because Dale was 10 feet away with a clipboard, and anything I said would become a line item in a report filed with the court. Emotional distress observed in father. Inappropriate reaction to child's behavior. I brought lunch, I said. PB&J, no crusts. The way you like it. Liam took half a sandwich. Caleb took the other half and sat next to me on the bench, close enough that his shoulder touched my arm. "How's school?" I asked. "Fine," Caleb said. Then quieter, "I got an A on my science project. Weather systems." Weather systems. That's solid work. "I wanted to call you about it." "You can always call me." He shook his head once. "Mom said the phone's for emergencies." Dale wrote something down. I watched his pen move and said nothing. The 2 hours passed the way they always did. Liam loosened up after 40 minutes. Let me push him on the swings. Caleb sat beside me on the bench and told me about his teacher, Mrs. Patterson, who let him read during lunch. He talked about a book where a kid builds a raft and sails to an island. He told me the whole plot, start to finish, while Liam swung higher and higher behind us. At 11:05, 10 minutes before the end, Caleb reached into his jacket pocket, pulled something out. A red Hot Wheels car, 1970 Chevelle SS. The paint chipped, a deep scratch running the length of the driver's side. One I'd given him 3 birthdays ago. He pressed it into my palm. "Keep it," he said, "so you don't forget me." Building a sentence like that. I closed my fingers around the car. The metal was warm from his pocket. "I won't forget you," I said. "Not possible." "Promise?" "On my life." Dale called time at noon. Isabella walked them back to the Lexus. Liam waved from the back seat. Caleb didn't look back. The SUV pulled out of the lot at 12,003. Dale packed his folding chair, nodded at me, and left. I sat on the picnic table for another 40 minutes, holding the Chevelle, watching the empty swing chains twist in the wind. The petition arrived on a Monday. Davis called at 7 a.m., an hour after my shift ended. I was sitting on the Murphy bed, unlacing my work boots. "They filed this morning," he said. "Termination of parental rights. Section 1 Texas Family Code." I set down my boot. "Say that again." "Vanessa's attorneys are petitioning to terminate your parental rights. Constructive abandonment. They're citing your address, your income, and 3 missed visitation dates." The missed dates: October, November, January. Each one caused by a last-minute hearing schedule change filed by Devereaux and Associates. Motions that required my presence at the courthouse on the same Saturday mornings as my visitation window. Miss the hearing, contempt of court. Miss the visit, abandoning your children. A rigged choice either way. "Hearing set for March 14th, Davis said. 6 weeks. What do we do? Silence on the line. Papers shuffling. I'll file a response. Challenge the constructive abandonment claim. The scheduling conflicts are documented. We can show the pattern. Will that be enough? More silence. Davis handled 40 active cases. He'd met me 3 times outside a courtroom. He was a decent man with an impossible caseload, and we both knew it. "I'll do everything I can," he said. "But you should know Kessler's still assigned, and their team has resources mine doesn't." I hung up and sat with my boots half unlaced, staring at the photo on the shelf. Constructive abandonment. They were arguing that I'd abandoned Caleb and Liam. that a man who arrived 30 minutes early to every visitation, who ate vending machine sandwiches to save money for legal fees, who held a scratched Hot Wheels car like it was the last proof he existed, that man had abandoned his sons. The confrontation came 3 days later. Vanessa called my cell first direct contact in 4 months and said to meet her in the parking lot outside Davis's office. 5 minutes, she said. Neutral ground. She was leaning against her Range Rover when I pulled in. Arms folded. The Cartier watch caught the late afternoon light. "I want to explain the filing," she said. "Then explain it. The boys need stability. A permanent home. A real school district. A family structure that works. You can't provide that from a studio apartment on a janitor's salary. I had a career. Your father made sure I don't." Her mouth thinned. "This isn't about Daddy. The 3 missed visitations were caused by your attorney's scheduling motions. Filed the Friday before each Saturday visit. You know that. I know you weren't there." She straightened up from the car. "And I know what the judge will see. A man who can't hold a job, can't keep an address, can't show up. That's the record, Gavin. The record your family manufactured." She looked at me the way she'd looked at me at those River Oaks dinner parties. The distance between where I stood and where she needed me to be, and finding it too wide. "Sign the papers," she said. "Walk away clean. Daddy's attorney will structure a voluntary relinquishment. No hearing, no public record. You just disappear. From my sons' lives. From a life that's already moved on without you." I held her eyes. The parking lot was empty except for our 2 vehicles and a dumpster against the back wall. Late light coming through the trees. "No," I said. Her chin lifted half an inch. The same register she used with housekeepers and waiters and anyone she'd decided was below her line of sight. "They won't remember you," she said. "Liam already calls you Gavin. Give it another year, and Caleb will too. You're fighting for something that's already gone." She got in the Range Rover and closed the door without waiting for a response. The engine started. She pulled out. I drove back to 3rd Ward, parked, sat in the truck until the sun went down. 6 weeks. March 14th. A judge who golfed with Roland, an attorney stretched across 40 cases, and a legal system that judged a father's worth by his zip code and his W-2. No connections, no leverage. Nothing except a refusal to quit and 2 boys who were being taught, 1 Saturday at a time, to let me go. That night, I stood in the hospital break room at 3 a.m. cinder block walls, the color of old teeth. The vending machine hummed in the corner. I opened my locker and looked at Caleb's Hot Wheels car on the top shelf, the Scratched Red Chevelle, sitting next to my printed visitation schedule. "Keep it so you don't forget me." I closed the locker, picked up my mop, walked into the basement corridor. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The linoleum stretched out, empty and polished. I pushed the mop in long strokes, the way I did every night, because the work was all I had left, and a man's dignity lives in his hands. Then the sound came from down the corridor. A shuffle, the heavy, wrong sound of a body going down. I dropped the mop and ran. 30 feet down the corridor, a man was on the floor. Hospital gown, bare feet, one arm braced against the wall. 80-something, skin like wet paper over bone. His other hand clutched a leather folder against his chest. I caught him before his skull hit the linoleum, got under his shoulders, and eased him down. His body weighed nothing. a frame held together by tape and will. The folder slipped from his grip and hit the tile. His hand locked around my wrist. The grip was wrong for a man, this frail, desperate, iron-tight, strength from somewhere beyond muscle. "Your mother," he said. His eyes rolled back. I held him with one arm and hit the emergency call button on the wall with the other. On the floor beside us, the folder had fallen open. Legal document, heavy paper, embossed letterhead. The name across the top hit me before I could look away. Ashworth. 2 nurses came from the East Wing station at a run. They took him, vitals, oxygen mask, a gurney in under a minute. I stepped back against the wall and watched them work. Rosa, one of the night shift nurses, glanced over her shoulder. "You know him?" "No." "Found him on the floor." They wheeled him away. I stood in the empty corridor holding the leather folder, listening to the gurney wheels fade around the corner. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The linoleum where he'd gone down was still wet from my mop. I opened the folder. A will typed on cream paper. Reginald Ashworth. A Galveston address. An attorney's name. Miriam Slade, Harborside Drive, Galveston. Figures I skimmed but didn't process. My hands were steady. The rest of me wasn't sure what to be. I set the folder on the nurse's station desk with a note clipped to it. Found in East Corridor, patient transported to ER. Then I picked up my mop and finished my shift. Ashworth. My mother's maiden name. The name on a death certificate I'd filed in a box that Vanessa shoved into the garage. The name my mother dropped like a stone into deep water, never once spoken at our kitchen table in Pasadena. What she'd been before Pasadena, before Ned, before me. She'd bricked over and left no door. I pushed the mop in long strokes and let the rhythm fill my head instead. At 6:45 a.m., 15 minutes before clockout, Jorge found me in the supply closet. "That patient you helped last night," he said. "VIP suite, 5th floor. Asking for you." "For me?" "For the janitor who caught him." "That's you. Shift's almost done. Go, I'll clock you out." I took the service elevator to 5. Carpet. Instead of linoleum up here, art on the walls. I was still in my scrubs, still wearing the badge that said maintenance staff. The VIP suite had curtains instead of blinds. A couch for visitors. A window facing east with morning light cutting across the bed. The room smelled like antiseptic and something older leather worn soft by daily handling. Reginald Ashworth sat propped against 2 pillows. Oxygen tube under his nose, IV in his right arm. Gaunt, but his face held what it must have been before age stripped it away. High cheekbones, a strong nose, deep-set gray eyes that locked on me the second I crossed the threshold. White hair combed to one side. On his right hand, a worn gold signet ring. On the bedside table, a leather-bound journal and the folder I'd returned. Not waiting for doctors, not for medication, for an answer. "Young man," his voice was thin but controlled. "Come in, close the door." I closed it. "You caught me last night." "In the corridor." "Yes, sir." He studied my face, not casual, a reading. His gray eyes moved across my features the way I scanned routing codes on a manifest. Looking for a match. "What is your name?" he asked. "Gavin Trask." Something cracked behind his expression. "Trask," he said, then slower, "your mother's maiden name." "Tell me now, young man." I don't have the luxury of patience anymore. The room held nothing but the oxygen hiss and the heart monitor's beat. I hadn't said my mother's maiden name in years. She'd been Ellen Trask as long as I knew her. What came before? Before Ned? Before Pasadena? Before me? She'd walled off and never spoken of. Ashworth, I said. His gray eyes went wet. His jaw tightened and his hand reached for the bedside table. Missed. Found it on the second try. He opened the leather folder and pulled out the photograph. He held it toward me. A young woman on the Galveston seawall. 23, maybe 24. Pale blue dress, the wind in her hair. Behind her, the harbor cranes and container ships blurred against an open sky. She was looking at the camera with a half-smile, the kind that meant she was about to say something to whoever held the lens. Something warm, something private. I knew that face, those cheekbones. That half-smile I'd seen 1,000 times across the kitchen table in Pasadena, before she got sick, before the hospital, before the flat tone on the monitor I could still hear if a room got quiet enough. The last time I'd seen that face I was 12, and she was lying in a hospital bed. Different building, same kind of light. I turned the photograph over. On the back, in a neat, upright hand, my daughter Ellen, June 1988. I sat in the visitor's chair. My legs made the decision without consulting my head. "That's my mother," I said. "Yes." His voice had dropped. Not weak-loaded with something carried too long. She was my daughter. The monitor beeped. The oxygen hissed. Morning traffic moved 5 floors below. "I drove her away," he said, 36 years ago. She came to me and told me she'd fallen in love with a mechanic from Pasadena, a man named Ned Trask. He closed his eyes. 3 seconds. Opened them. I told her she was throwing her life away, that a man who worked with his hands would give her a small life. His fingers gripped the blanket, released. I gave her a choice, the family or the mechanic. She chose my father, I said. She chose correctly. He turned toward the window. I was wrong about every piece of it. Your father gave her what I couldn't, a life she chose for herself. The light through the curtains moved across the bed. He was quiet for a long time. She cut all contact, he said, changed her name, vanished. I earned that. Respected her decision for 5 years. Then I started looking. His hand found the journal on the bedside table. He opened it and held it where I could read the pages. The pages were soft with age, salt stained at the edges. Dense, small handwriting filled every line in columns. Date, position, weather, cargo, heading. Nautical log entries. Ship's format. 1 entry per day. He turned to a page near the middle. March 1990. Under the column marked Cargo, in the same handwriting from the photograph, Ellen, still searching. He turned forward. 1995, Ellen, still searching. 2003, same 3 words. 2011, same. 2019, same. Every entry, he said. 36 years, page after page. The same notation repeated in an old man's hand across 3 decades of days. Not a search, a sentence he served willingly, written 1 day at a time. I set the journal back on the table. He'd searched for my mother longer than I'd been alive. I hired investigators, he said. They traced her to Pasadena, found she'd married your father, found she'd had a son. His voice dropped lower. Then they found she'd died. Cancer. November 1998, I said. I know the exact date. I know the hospital. I know where she's buried. I went once, stood at the headstone for an hour. He paused. There weren't words for what I needed to say. He turned back to me. Those gray eyes, I recognized them now. My mother's eyes, the same ones that looked at me from the bathroom mirror every morning. Aged 60 years, 36 of them spent looking for a woman who'd walked away because he couldn't accept the man she loved. After Ellen, I looked for Ned, he said. Your father. But he'd moved, more than once after she passed. The investigators lost the trail. Then Ned died. 5 years ago, I said. Heart attack, at the shop. After that, they searched for you. Common surname, no records that went anywhere. He paused. I had a stroke 3 years ago. 18 months of recovery. When my investigators resumed, whatever life you'd been living had disappeared from every database they checked. No employer, no property, no trail. A breath left him. Then I ended up in this hospital. And a janitor caught me in a basement corridor at 3 in the morning. Neither of us spoke. The door opened. A woman walked in, 60, sharp-featured gray suit, black briefcase. She moved like someone pulled from bed before dawn and dressed for court by the time she reached the car. Miriam Slade, Reginald said. My estate attorney, 20 years. She set the briefcase on the side table and studied me, the look of a lawyer deciding whether the person in front of her would simplify things or complicate them. Mr. Trask, she said, I've been looking for you for a long time. She opened the briefcase and pulled a file an inch thick. Didn't sit. Stood at the foot of Reginald's bed and laid it out in 3 sentences. No inflection, the way you read a manifest to someone who didn't order the cargo. Ashworth Shipping International. An operational fleet of 12 vessels out of Galveston. Physical properties, including a harborfront office and a climate-controlled archive warehouse on Harborside Drive. Liquid assets held in trust, exceeding $40 million. The numbers landed and sat there, 40 million. I owed $685 in back rent. 12 vessels, 60 years of records. 6 hours ago, I'd been emptying biohazard bins in the basement. My bank account held $1,100. I was 6 weeks from losing my sons forever. And a woman in a gray suit was reading me an inheritance worth more than I'd earn in 3 lifetimes. I looked at my hands. Bleach cracks across the knuckles. The hands of a man who mopped hospital floors for $14.50 an hour. Reginald reached for my hand. I gave it. He turned it palm up and pressed something into it. The gold signet ring from his right hand. An anchor crossed with a compass rose, the metal worn smooth by 50 years. This is yours now, he said. You're the last Ashworth. The ring sat in my palm, heavy for its size, warm from his skin. I told Ellen that a mechanic would give her a small life, he said. His gray eyes held mine. She said a small life with love in it was bigger than an empire without. It took me 36 years to understand a sentence she said in 5 seconds. Miriam closed the file and returned it to her briefcase. I'll need you at the Galveston offices within the week, Mr. Trask. The archive warehouse alone holds 60 years of documentation. Every bill of lading, every customs declaration, every client invoice Ashworth Shipping ever processed. Every client invoice. Something fired in the back of my head. The same reflex that caught the Class 3 misclassification at Meridian. A wrong note in a column of right ones. I couldn't name it, couldn't trace it. Pattern recognition with nowhere to land yet. I closed my hand around the ring and put it in my pocket, next to Caleb's Scratched Red Chevelle. Miriam Slade called at 9 the next morning. I was sitting on the Murphy bed, still in my scrubs, the signet ring on the nightstand next to Caleb's Chevelle. "I've retained Catherine Boyle," she said. "Family law, 22 years, no ties to Wainwright, Devereaux, or anyone in Roland's orbit. She's bringing a forensic accountant named David Pock and a paralegal team of 3. I can't afford." This comes from Reginald's estate. His instructions were explicit. "Whatever it takes." She paused. "There's something else. I have a contact at the federal prosecutor's office, Southern District of Texas, Assistant U.S. Attorney named Carolyn Reeves. She's been trying to get into Houston real estate corruption for 3 years. Doesn't have the evidence. You might." "The archives," I said. "The archives. I need you in Galveston this week." I called Jorge, told him I'd need time off. A week, maybe more. Didn't say why. "Family thing?" he asked. "Something like that. Take the days. Marcus can cover your corridor." I drove to Galveston on a Wednesday morning. I-45 south, through League City and across the causeway, the bay water gray and flat under low clouds. Harborside Drive ran along the port. Warehouses and shipping offices lined up in a row. Ashworth Shipping International sat at the end of the block. Salt-streaked brick, iron shutters, a company sign above the entrance that hadn't been repainted in a decade. Miriam met me at the front door with a key ring. Behind the main building, a metal warehouse stretched back. Windowless, climate-controlled, dehumidifiers droning through the walls. 60 years of records, she said. Every bill of lading, customs, form, contract, and client invoice the company ever processed. Paper index system, cross-referenced by year and client. She unlocked the warehouse door. Fluorescent tubes clicked on row by row, lighting industrial shelving that ran floor to ceiling in 8 long rows. Bankers' boxes filled every shelf. White cardboard, labeled in black marker with dates and client codes. Hundreds of them. A desk sat against the far wall under a green banker's lamp, with an empty chair and a box of white cotton gloves. "The 1990s section is rows 4 and 5, she said. "Wainwright Development Group is filed under client code WDG. She set the keyring on the desk. "Call when you need me." She left. The warehouse door shut behind her with a heavy metal sound. I stood alone in 60 years of shipping records, the lamp throwing a circle of green light across the desk. I pulled on the cotton gloves and walked to row 4. The first WDG box was dated 1994. I set it on the desk and lifted the lid. Bills of lading, stacked in chronological order. Standard international shipping documents. Origin port, destination port, routing codes, tariff classification, cargo description, weight, carrier allocation, billing rate. Construction materials. Steel rebar, concrete aggregate, copper piping, electrical conduit. Bulk shipments moving from manufacturers to Wainwright development sites across Houston. I picked up the first invoice. January 1995. A 40-foot container of steel rebar shipped from a Mexican manufacturer. Origin Port, GLS Galveston. 3 letters in the header that told me where this container had cleared U.S. Customs. I looked at the billing section. Tariff rate applied, Long Beach schedule, LGB rates. Galveston Port, Long Beach pricing. I set the invoice down, picked up the next one. February 1995. Copper piping, Korean supplier. Origin GLS billing rate, LGB schedule. Third invoice, March 1995. Concrete aggregate, GLS origin, LGB billing. I pulled a calculator from my pocket and ran the differential. Galveston tariff rates for construction materials in 1995 averaged $1,840 per 20-foot equivalent unit. Long Beach rates for the same classifications averaged $2,614 per TEU, a difference of $774 per container, 42%. Every invoice in the box carried the same pattern. Containers entering through Galveston, a regional Gulf Coast port with competitive tariff structures, billed to Ashworth Shipping at Long Beach rates. Premium pricing from a terminal 3 time zones away for cargo that never went near California. I opened the second box. 996. Same pattern. Third box. Time 97. Same. I worked through the morning without stopping. The banker's lamp burned its circle on the desk surface. My hands moved through the documents in a rhythm I recognized. The same cadence that had carried me through 8 years at Meridian, reading freight manifests the way my father listened to engines. Port codes, tariff classifications, routing numbers. A language I spoke before, I learned the alphabet. Linda Chen had asked me once how I saw things others missed. The numbers were wrong. They bothered me. These numbers were wrong. And they weren't a mistake. A tariff misclassification happens. Overworked clerks, outdated rate tables, data entry errors. You see one invoice with the wrong port code, you flag it and move on. You see 10, you investigate the carrier. You see 1,400 spread across 8 years, all from the same client, all inflating costs by the same 42%, and you're not looking at an error. You're looking at a theft. By noon, I had a stack of yellow legal pad pages covered in columns. 8 years of invoices, 1995 through 2003. Over 1,400 individual bills of lading. Everyone showing a Galveston origin billed at Long Beach rates. I ran the total 3 times on the calculator because a number that size deserves verification. $11.6 million. Skimmed from Ashworth Shipping through falsified routing codes over 8 years. The surplus would have flowed straight into Wainwright Development Group's operating capital. Seed money for construction projects. Down payments on land acquisitions. The foundation under an empire that now carried $280 million in active development. Roland's breakout period. The years when he went from a strip mall in Katy to a portfolio of commercial towers across Houston. I'd heard the story at dinner parties. The self-made Texan. The bootstrapper. The builder who turned grit into a name on hospital wings. Vanessa told it with pride. Roland told it with the same slow nod he'd used the first time he shook my hand. Practiced, warm, empty. The real story was on the desk in front of me. 1,400 invoices. Every one a line item in a fraud that funded the Wainwright name. To anyone else, a judge, a juror, a detective. These were boxes of old shipping paperwork. numbers in columns on yellowed paper. Without translation, they meant nothing. To me, they were an engine turning over. And I could hear every rod knocking, every valve misfiring, every wrong note. Roland had played for 8 years running. His mistake wasn't the fraud. Other men had stolen more and walked clean. His mistake was what he did afterward. He'd destroyed my career, wiped my professional identity, reduced a senior supply chain analyst to a man with a mop and a bucket and $1,100 in the bank. 47 rejected applications, 18 months of silence from an industry that used to route its hardest accounts to my desk. But he didn't destroy what mattered. The knowledge lived in my hands. 8 years of reading freight manifests didn't vanish because no one was paying me to do it anymore. The codes, the tariff tables, the port differentials, I carried them the way my father carried the sound of a failing transmission. Not in a title, not in a paycheck. In what I could do. Roland should have left me employed and comfortable and ignorant. Instead, he stripped me of everything except the one skill that could read his confession. He built the weapon that would take him apart, and he built it out of me. I called Miriam from the warehouse desk. "I found it," I said. "How bad?" 11.6 million. 8 years, 1,400 invoices. All documented. 3 seconds of nothing on the line. "I'm calling Carolyn Reeves tonight," she said. Catherine Boyle, the family attorney Miriam had retained, arrived in Galveston the next morning. 51, short, gray hair, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. Navy blazer, legal pad already half full of notes. No small talk. She sat across from me at the warehouse desk and laid out the custody strategy in 4 minutes. "The termination petition rests on 3 pillars," she said. "Inadequate housing, low income, and missed visitations. All 3 were manufactured by Wainwright's legal team. We can prove the scheduling conflicts. We can show the blacklisting. And now we can show motive. Roland didn't just want you away from his grandchildren. He needed you away from these records." She turned to a second page. "But the petition isn't the only front. Kessler needs to go." "My previous attorney filed a bias motion," I said. "It went nowhere. Your previous attorney was a decent man with 40 cases and no budget. I have 3 paralegals and a forensic accountant with subpoena access." David Pock, the forensic accountant Miriam had hired, late 30s, wire-rimmed glasses, quiet in the way people are quiet when they're running numbers behind their eyes, had already pulled public records on Kessler. Golf club membership rolls, charity donation filings, event photographs. River Oaks Country Club had published an anniversary booklet the prior year with photographs of members at social events. Page 47 showed Roland and Kessler at a club dinner, seated together, glasses raised. 2 men who decided custody cases over steak and bourbon, captured in glossy print for anyone who cared to look. I went back to Houston 2 days later, told Jorge I was ready to work. He didn't ask questions. I clocked in at 11 that night, picked up my mop, and pushed it down the basement corridor while the lawyers built their case. Catherine filed the emergency recusal motion on a Friday. 43 pages of documented ties between Judge Harmon Kessler and Roland Wainwright. Club sponsorship paid from Roland's personal account. 5-figure donations from the Wainwright Foundation to charities chaired by Kessler's wife. 9 years of social contact at the same country club. golf scorecards with both their names, pulled from the club's public tournament records. The Texas Commission on Judicial Conduct responded in 3 weeks. Mandatory recusal. Kessler stepped down from the case without a hearing. Resignation dressed as procedure. He knew what a full investigation would turn up if he fought it. The custody case landed on the desk of Judge Patricia Navarro, 48 years old, appointed from the Western District. No membership at River Oaks Country Club. No donations from any Wainwright entity. No Saturday golf with anyone in Roland's orbit. She reviewed the existing case file, the termination petition, the scheduling records, Catherine's response. And her clerk called Catherine on a Tuesday. The judge wanted to see the complete hearing schedule alongside my employment records and the visitation log. Not Roland's version, the actual files. The federal side had been moving since the night I found the invoices. Miriam called Carolyn Reeves as she'd promised. The assistant U.S. attorney reviewed them over a weekend and had her answer by Monday. Wire fraud, mail fraud, customs fraud, falsified bills of lading crossing state and international lines. A scheme running 8 years, generating $11.6 million in stolen revenue. Federal jurisdiction. RICO eligible. The investigation opened without a press conference, without subpoenas served on camera. A case number in a federal database and a prosecutor who held what she'd been missing for 3 years. Documentary evidence that Roland Wainwright's network couldn't buy, bury, or make disappear. Because it had been sitting in a warehouse in Galveston for 2 decades, filed in white cardboard boxes, waiting for someone who could read it. The signet ring hung on a chain under my scrubs, against my chest. Caleb's Chevelle sat in my pocket. Every shift, I pushed the mop down the basement corridor in long strokes under the fluorescent lights. Same floor, same linoleum, same 3 a.m. silence. But somewhere in a federal building downtown, a prosecutor was reading port codes that would take apart an empire. And the man who translated them was pushing a mop, waiting for the gears to turn, because patience was the one weapon Roland never thought to take. The subpoenas arrived on a Tuesday morning. Catherine called at 6 a.m. I was unlacing my boots after the graveyard shift, same routine. Murphy bed, Dowling Street. Caleb Chevelle on the nightstand next to the signet ring. Federal agents are serving Wainwright Development Group right now, she said. 32 subpoenas. Every active project frozen pending investigation. Carolyn Reeves got her warrant last night. How frozen? I asked. $280 million in development assets. Bank accounts, construction escrows, property holdings. The FBI Financial Crimes Unit is executing a search warrant on his Galleria Tower offices as we speak. I pictured Roland's 28th floor, the limestone walls, the Sam Houston letter under museum glass, the spindle-top oil certificates. Federal agents with document boxes, photographing everything, pulling files from drawers. Roland assumed no one would ever open. Devereaux, I asked. Next, Carolyn subpoenaed the firm's client files, including your divorce and custody proceedings. The dual representation alone is enough for a bar complaint. I hung up and sat on the Murphy bed. Somewhere across Houston, the glass tower on Post Oak Boulevard was filling with people who read documents the way I did. Looking for numbers that didn't belong, Roland fought back. A man who'd spent 30 years building a network doesn't watch it burn without reaching for the phone. Catherine's paralegal team tracked the fallout through public filings and courthouse gossip. Within 48 hours of the subpoenas, Roland called Judge Kessler's private line. Kessler, already under judicial conduct investigation from the recusal, didn't pick up. Roland called the managing partner at Devereaux and Associates. The firm's general counsel answered instead and told him that all Wainwright matters had been transferred to outside counsel that morning. He called 2 city council members who'd attended his annual dove hunt in South Texas for a decade. Both returned the calls through staffers. Catherine's paralegal played me one of the recordings, a 26-year-old legislative aide reading from a script. Mr. Wainwright, the councilman, values your years of friendship but is unable to discuss matters under federal review. Language so careful it said everything by saying nothing. We don't know you anymore. He called River Oaks Country Club and requested an emergency meeting with the board. The club manager informed him his membership was under review, pending resolution of certain legal matters. 3 decades of handshakes and bourbon and favors traded over lunch, gone in the space of a week. The network Roland had built was a network of convenience. Men who stood beside him because standing beside him was profitable. The moment it wasn't, they walked. Kessler resigned from the bench 11 days after the subpoenas landed. Not from the case. He'd already been recused. From the bench itself. A 1-paragraph letter to the chief judge citing personal reasons. Retirement effective at once. The judicial conduct investigation continued anyway. A career ended not with a ruling, but with a 1-paragraph letter and a parking garage nobody watched. Craig Devereaux Jr. was disbarred 6 weeks later. The state bar's findings cited conflict of interest, breach of fiduciary duty, and ethical violations resulting from dual representation of adversarial parties. His father's firm survived, but stripped the Wainwright name from every filing, every contact list, every corridor conversation. The name that had built the practice was now the name hollowing it out. I heard about Vanessa through Catherine, who heard it through courthouse channels and the kind of talk that moves through Houston society faster than a legal filing. The charity boards pulled her invitations first. The Wainwright Foundation canceled its annual benefit, the event where she'd introduced me as my husband without giving my name. The Houston Children's Fund, where we'd met 8 years ago at the Petroleum Club, removed her from its planning committee. The private school, where Caleb and Liam were enrolled, sent a letter about recent developments and recommended the boys' transfer. The neighbors in River Oaks stopped calling. Women who'd attended Vanessa's book clubs and Pilates sessions and holiday parties found reasons to be unavailable. The Wainwright name, which had opened every door in Houston for 3 decades, now closed them. Not with a sound, with silence, unreturned messages, empty chairs at tables where Vanessa used to sit. The Georgian Colonial on Inwood Drive sat in a neighborhood that had decided, without a word spoken aloud, that the family inside no longer belonged. Vanessa had spent years teaching Caleb and Liam that their grandfather's name was a skeleton key. Now the locks were changing, one by one, and nobody was cutting new keys. The custody hearing took place on a Thursday in April. Courtroom 7B, 4th floor. A different room, a different floor, a different world from Kessler's 4C. Judge Navarro sat behind the bench with the case file open. Dark hair pulled back, reading glasses she put on and removed as she moved between documents. No photographs of politicians on her walls. No signed letters from historical figures. A Texas state flag and a framed copy of the judicial oath. Nothing on the bench but the case file and a glass of water. The room ran 15 degrees warmer than Kessler's courtroom. The air conditioning worked the way it was supposed to. Vanessa sat across the aisle with her new attorney, a family lawyer named Marcus Sutton she'd retained after Roland's legal team withdrew. Navy dress. No jewelry except her mother's Cartier watch. Her jaw was set, a muscle ticking beneath her ear. Catherine stood at the podium with a binder 3 inches thick. She opened it. Your Honor, the petitioner seeks termination of Gavin Trask's parental rights under Section 61 of the Texas Family Code. The petition rests on 3 claims: inadequate housing, low income, and missed visitations. We will show that all 3 were manufactured by the petitioner's family to produce a predetermined outcome. First tab. Employment records. 47 application rejections mapped against phone records and industry board meeting minutes. 3 companies that had drafted offer letters before a single phone call reversed their decisions. Mr. Trask was a senior supply chain analyst with 8 years of strong performance reviews, Catherine said. He was not unemployable. He was blacklisted. Navarro's pen stopped moving. She looked up from the binder and studied the documents. Across the aisle, Vanessa's eyes stayed fixed on a point above the judge's head. Second tab. Scheduling records from Devereaux and Associates. Every motion filed on a Friday afternoon before a Saturday visitation. Timestamps, filing numbers, clerk notations. 3 missed visits, each caused by a hearing that required my presence at the courthouse during the exact 2-hour window. I was allowed to see my sons. The missed visitations were not abandonment, she said. They were traps. Sutton shifted in his chair. He'd seen the documents. He knew what was coming. Third tab. Financial records. Roland's donations to Kessler's wife's charity, club membership sponsorship, golf tournament pairings. The River Oaks Country Club anniversary booklet, page 47. Roland and Kessler at a club dinner, glasses raised, seated side by side. The judge who ruled on every hearing in this case had a documented 9-year personal and financial relationship with the respondent's father. Every ruling was tainted. She closed the binder. What happened to Gavin Trask was not a custody dispute. It was a demolition. His career was destroyed to create the appearance of instability. His visitations were sabotaged to create the appearance of abandonment. A compromised judge made sure every hearing produced the right result. And all of it, every phone call, every motion, every ruling, served one purpose: to separate a father from his children. Not because he was unfit, because he was inconvenient. Navarro looked at the binder, then at me, then at Vanessa. She removed her glasses. Sutton stood and presented his response. The children's routine, income disparity, housing concerns. He did what he could with what he had, which wasn't much once Catherine's evidence had landed. The facts sat in the room like poured concrete. Nobody was going to move them. Navarro called a 30-minute recess. When she returned, she read from prepared notes. The petition for termination of parental rights is dismissed. The evidence before this court reveals a coordinated effort to manufacture the conditions cited in the petition. This court finds no basis for termination under Section 61. She turned a page. Custody is hereby modified. Primary custody of Caleb and Liam Trask is awarded to their father, Gavin Trask, effective today. The respondent will have supervised visitation on a schedule to be set by this court. My hands were on my knees. The Chevelle sat in my left pocket. The signet ring pressed against my chest under my shirt. Vanessa didn't move. Sutton leaned toward her and said something I couldn't hear. She shook her head once. Her hands stayed folded in her lap, the same posture she'd held in Kessler's courtroom the day she'd won everything. Same hands, same lap, different verdict. In the hallway, Catherine closed her briefcase. "How are you doing?" she asked. "I'll know when they're home," I said. She nodded. "We'll arrange pickup this week." 2 weeks after the hearing, Carolyn Reeves called. "Grand jury returned the indictment today," she said. "Wire fraud, mail fraud, customs fraud, RICO conspiracy. 1,400 counts tied to the shipping invoices. Maximum exposure, 20 years. He surrenders Monday morning. Federal courthouse. Roland Wainwright turned himself in at the federal courthouse in downtown Houston on a Monday morning. 63 years old. Bail set at $2 million. The name on hospital wings and university lecture halls and charity galas. The name Vanessa had carried as currency and Roland had built on stolen shipping invoices was now a name on a federal docket sheet. But the boys came home first. I picked up Caleb and Liam 5 days after the hearing on a Saturday. No park, no rusted swings. No Dale in a folding chair with a clipboard, logging my fatherhood in 15-minute intervals. Catherine's paralegal had arranged the transfer through Sutton. Neutral location. The lobby of a family services office on Westheimer Road. Caleb came through the door first. Same face. The cowlick at his crown fighting the side part. Someone had combed into it each morning. He saw me and stopped. Looked at me the way I'd looked at the photograph of my mother in Reginald's hospital room, checking if what he was seeing was real. Then he ran, full speed, arms locked around my waist, face pressed into my shirt. He didn't speak. Liam came through the door behind him. New shoes. A backpack with a logo I didn't recognize. He stopped 6 feet away with his hands at his sides, watching his brother hold on to me. I knelt down. "Hey, buddy," I said. He looked at my face. Eyes that had been coached to see a stranger where his father used to be. "Hey, Dad," he said. I pulled him in, both of them. Caleb's fist gripped the back of my shirt. Liam's hand found mine and held on the way he used to hold my index finger when he was small, like I might disappear if he let go. I stood up, took Caleb's hand in my left, Liam's in my right, walked through the lobby door into the parking lot. The Chevelle pressed against my thigh with every step. Their hands were warm. Before I continue, please like and give my revenge a score from 1 to 10. I want to hear your thoughts. 6 months later, Galveston. Harbor windows open to salt air and the sound of container cranes working the docks. I sat at the desk where Reginald's archivist had worked for 40 years, reading a manifest for a grain shipment out of Corpus Christi. The routing was clean. The numbers were right. The Ashworth signet ring sat on my right hand. Anchor crossed with a compass rose, the gold worn smooth by 50 years on Reginald's finger and 6 months on mine. 12 vessels, 3 continents of routes. A staff of 64 who called me Mr. Ashworth until I corrected them. Trask. The Ashworth name was on the company. Mine was the one I'd earned. Through the open windows, gulls worked the harbor air. A tug guided a container ship toward the channel markers. I watched it clear the breakwater, then went back to the manifest. At home, a 3-bedroom house on a quiet street, nothing like Inwood Drive, nothing like Dowling Street. Caleb and Liam had claimed every surface. Liam's sneakers by the front door, laces untied. Caleb's library books on the kitchen counter, drawings taped to the refrigerator, the hallway walls, the bathroom mirror, toys on the floor, beds unmade. A Saturday in October, I helped Caleb unpack the last boxes from River Oaks. Clothes he'd outgrown, school papers, a science fair trophy from a competition I'd missed. We sorted through them on his bedroom floor. "Almost done," I said. Caleb grabbed one end of his old mattress, the one piece of the River Oaks bedroom that had come with the boxes, to flip it over. Something slid from between the mattress and the box spring. A stack of papers held together with a rubber band. Crayon on white printer paper. The edges soft from handling. Caleb's hands stopped moving. I picked them up, took off the rubber band. The first drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands. The tallest was labeled Dad in red crayon. The middle one said me. The smallest said Liam. They stood in front of a house with a yellow door and a triangle roof and smoke from the chimney. Green grass, blue sky, a circle sun. Second drawing. Same 3 figures at a park. Swings behind them. Third, the 3 of us at a table, something on each plate I couldn't make out, a window with stars outside. Fourth, fifth, 12 drawings total made during the months his brother learned to call me Gavin. Hidden under a mattress in a room designed for a catalog, kept safe the way I'd kept his Chevelle on the top shelf of my locker. I sat on his bed. Caleb sat next to me. Neither of us spoke. He leaned into my side. I put my arm around him and held the drawings in my lap and looked at the yellow door his small hand had given to a house that didn't exist yet. On my desk at the Galveston office, framed beside the harbor window where the salt air comes through, sits a page from Reginald's logbook. Next to it, Caleb's Scratched Red Chevelle. The last entry Reginald wrote, date, position, weather, fair. And under cargo, in the same hand that had written Ellen. Still searching across 36 years of entries. 2 words. Cargo. Delivered.